the universe. All right? So this is our galaxy, but let's keep going. We're going to go out 500,000 light years, and that puts us in what is called, or allows us to take in the satellite galaxies to ours. So we have the Milky Way in the center, and it picks up 9 dwarf galaxies. These are very common in the universe. Some of them are known. The Magellan, Lesser and Major. You probably remember those, right? I think it was also a rock group in the 1970s. And when you're in the 9 dwarf galaxies, right? You get 200. Now you're up to 225 billion stars. But of course, we can keep going. We're going to go out 5 million light years now. The distance would be 5 million times 5.9 trillion if you want to get to miles. And remember, that's a radius. The actual total amount of universe we're looking at is the diameter, 10 million light years. And they call this the local group. And that's because it includes a couple of other galaxies that are near us, right? They kind of converged, including the most famous galaxy, the Andromeda, which gives us a look at what our galaxy is like. So when we take in this additional 2 galaxies to form the local group, plus their dwarfs, which you can see in some cases are literally totally off in the boondocks, all right? This is beyond Kona. We're talking about Easter Island out here. This is really out there, way far away from anything interesting, but yet those are galaxies filled with a lot of stars, because when you factor in the 37 dwarfs, you're now up to 700 billion stars. But we have to keep going. We're going to go out 100 million light years. We're going to be dealing with what is called the Virgo supercluster. These are superclusters of many, many galaxies, and the reason they formed is something the way the initial universe was created, whether it was Big Bang or otherwise. There were ripple effects going through the massive gases, and they created the ability, like in colloidal solutions or alphabet soup, for things to sort of clump together. And so you ended up not with a continuous homogeny of stars, but rather you had clusters. And one of them is our cluster. We're in the supercluster called Virgo. And in that supercluster, there are 2,500 galaxies, 25,000 dwarf galaxies, 200 galaxy groups for 200 trillion stars. All right? So it's big. It's getting big. But we got to go further. We're going to go out 1 billion light years. This is pretty interesting. Now, what you have here is what is called the neighboring superclusters. This essentially takes in but by the way, once we went to the clusters, we now move from the 2-dimensional to the 3-dimensional. So we're dealing with a sphere now. A sphere with a radius of 1 billion light years, diameter of 2 light years. So the volume is quite substantial. And every one of these little groupings here is a supercluster, right? 3-dimensional, you end up with 100 of them in that neighboring supercluster group, consisting of 240,000 galaxies, galaxy groups, 3 million, I can't read that, 30 million dwarf galaxies, 250,000 trillion stars. And now we come to our not really final destination. We're going to fly this ship out one more time, and we're going to come to the edge of the observable universe. And the first time that I saw this, when this came up, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And it actually has done that most of the time, every time I've done this since. This is just a profound and almost perhaps iconic image that maybe we've had in DNA for a very long time. This is the known universe. All of these little things are superclusters. We are at the very center because that's the way we're working this, right? We're flying out. Everything that we can at least see at this point is in this sphere. At the time this was created, it was 14 billion light years. Now it's up to 15 billion light years. And so here are the numbers we're dealing with. In what we know and can see based upon our astronomy and some extrapolations from certain analyses of quasars and so forth, we're hanging out with 10 billion superclusters, 25 billion galaxy groups consisting of 350 billion galaxies, 3.5 trillion dwarf galaxies. Total number of stars is 30 billion trillion stars, 30 times 10 to the 21st power. That is more stars than all the sands on all the beaches in the world. And if you take a shot glass and fill it with sand, it contains between 200 and 300,000 grains. right? The good sand. All the sands, all the beaches in the world does not give you that many grains of sand. So let's back up for a second. But there's something. One response is to think, I am not even a grain of sand. I am an absolute speck of nothing in the middle of perhaps 10 to the 21st trillion stars. I'm just inconsequential. This is overwhelming. This is impossible to grasp. Some people take it that way. I can understand that. But there is another way to look at it, and that is this. You have the unbelievable good fortune of not being a grasshopper or an amoeba. You are a sentient being self-aware. Therefore, you're aware of your existence, and by extension, you are aware of the fact that you are in this. You are aware of the fact that you are involved in something of this magnitude, this scope. Our being alone is never at issue ever, which raises some rather interesting issues. Now, before we launch into this extremely rapidly produced presentation here, I want to mention something else. A musical artist that almost certainly none of you have heard of. Her name is Susan Werner. She is a brilliant, beautiful, intelligent, clever musician, writer, and songsmith, and songstress. If it was 30 years ago in the golden era of content music with Baez and Collins and Joni Mitchell, she would certainly be known. But this is not those times. The fact is, though, that they are out there, people like Susan Werner and many others, and if you look for them, look past the, quote, music industry milieu, you can find them, and they have unbelievably impressive things to say. And she just came out with a new album. She has about 10 or 12. This new album is called The Gospel Truth. And it is, in fact, a non-gospel gospel music album. And when I heard her say that, it struck me very importantly because that resonates with another phrase that is extremely popular in our time, and that is the non-denial denial. This is Washington speak. This is 1984 New World speak. And in fact, so much of policy, government has been built on things like that. The non-denial, denial, right? The retiring, and whatever. And so I like that. You know, it kind of caught me. And I said, that's really, really cool. So I was listening to her in concert, and she herself. And she said that, and this is in the context of the new album, she said, I was raised a very strict Catholic. And by the time I got into my teens, I lapsed. And by the time I was in my 20s, I had moved so far from the core thinking that I became an elapsed Catholic, right? And then she said she then became a Crystal Methodist. And finally, she arrived at the point where she is now. She is an evangelical agnostic, which is to say that she is very passionate about her uncertainties, which raises a very significant point. And some free advice, okay, from this half-brained guy up here. In these times, it's very important that you be very careful about the certainties that you select. There are certainties in this world, and there is in this world, believe me. There's also plenty of things which simply cannot be clearly shown to be true or false. We know that. But there are some extremely clear truths and certainties in this world. But you have to be careful about which ones you select. It can make all the difference. And then after you've selected those certainties upon which you're going to function, it's very wise if you are passionate about your uncertainties. So with that, let us begin. We're about to move into